Hey everybody, welcome. Frank Vespi here. You there in Maryland Racing Today, stretching out in front of us here. The Maryland Racing Today podcast, part of the Mid-Atlantic Racing Today series of podcasts, powered by the Racing Biz, the racingbiz.com, the independent voice for Mid-Atlantic Racing. And Greeting Maryland Racing Today is presented by our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club, laurelpark.com for all their info. We got a really good show today. Really excited about this. First guest, main guest here is going to be Vinnie Perrone. Vinnie, former Washington Post racing reporter, Eclipse Award winner. And he's written what I think is really the sort of definitive, the one article you need to read. You're going to read one article about the passing of King Leatherbury. He passed away last week at age 92. Read Vinnie's. It's called Remembering Both King Leatherburys on the racingbiz.com. It's hilarious and touching and just captures a lot about a man he knew for 40 odd years. So really good stuff. Vinnie joining me momentarily. A little bit later, Mackenzie Pfeiffer, Maryland Jockey Club racing analyst, going to join us. She's going to be joined as well by John Piassek, the Racing Biz Maryland handicapper. We're going to go over some of the news from last week. And then John and Mac are going to look ahead to the week that's coming up in Maryland racing, maybe some picks and some picks plays, some analysis for the weekend racing. A couple stakes on tap at Laurel Park this weekend. We'll touch on all that a little bit down the road, but without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Vinnie Perrone. Joined here by Vinnie Perrone, former Washington Post reporter, to remember the great King Leatherbury, who passed away last week at age 92. The Hall of Famer, won over 6,500 races in his career. And Vinnie was around for a good chunk of it, starting in 1979 when he joined the Washington Post and subsequently became their horse racing reporter. I have commended to people your piece, Remembering Both King Leatherburys, on the racingbiz.com. Just a really funny, touching remembrance of a guy, Vinnie, who, really was one of one. They didn't make any more of those after that.
Well, first of all, Frank, thank you for dating me. That I started at the Post in 79. But one thing you and your listeners and viewers ought to know is I was 8 at the time. I was very precocious. Okay. So
this goes to our earlier conversation about the pictures you had on the wall, but we won't get into that.
Indeed. What can you say? What a treasure. Somebody who redefined the sport, who redefined how a trainer can operate under with the most optimum results. And from a reporter standpoint, which is really how I knew him, just a bonanza. He wasn't one of these outwardly emotive guys. I might approach him and he'd say, what do you need? And I'd ask him, a question, and he would fill the notebook and with stories, with really candid assessments and observations, with at times his own self-disparaging remarks, and he was just such an interesting and multidimensional man and trainer. And it was just it just substantiates everything about journalism and turf writing that one loves. Is that we come around with our hat in our hand, asking people to relinquish their thoughts, sometimes their secrets. These might be people we don't even know very well. And I'm always grateful when somebody like King goes ahead and just gives us everything we need and more.
Isn't that the truth? I think about that from time to time, doing this sort of job. You're going to people, you're asking them to be introspective, to touch on things that are important to them, sometimes to tell you things that, if they become widely known, could be damaging to them. And people do it. And it's a gift, that we as reporters are given from from the people who are willing to participate with us. I think sometimes I went and interviewed a trainer whose husband had recently passed away, and she had won some races on a big day and started telling me how she went to the cemetery that morning and said to him, I got the horses here, but you have to get them home. And she started crying, and it was like she was sharing these serious feelings with me. And I'm thinking, wow, like, you don't need to do this, and you're doing this. And boy, am I grateful that you are.
It's during my post years, I had occasion to cover basketball, football, baseball, and they were fine to cover. The events were, the events could be compelling, and the principles could be, somewhat revelatory. But man, there was nothing like the racetrack. It just, it was an open door in an open world. There's so much nuance and subtext to racing and all that goes on with it. But there's also, when you shamble into a stable on some weekday morning, it reflects the workaday life that made America great. You have these horse trainers, they don't have any 7-8 figure contracts. They're, oftentimes they got a day rate, and they're doing only as well as their horses. And yet there was a welcoming aspect to it, almost without exception. You go into a barn and trainers just lavish you with stories. And this was especially true when I first started out. And I mean, you look across the stable areas, and Leatherbury always was just a phenomenal quote. But you had Buddy Delp and Bernie Bond and Tuffy Hacker and Charlie Hadry and Bill Donovan. I mean, Eddie Gaudette. Come on. Did I ever tell you about the time I flew a plane under the Chesapeake Bay Bridge? That sort of thing, right? Sonny Hine one time, who told me how he and a buddy were transporting a horse on a trailer in an intersection in Chillicothe, Ohio. A woman rammed into the van. It was some cheap claimer they were selling for about $50. And Sonny told the woman, "Lady, look what you did. You ruined our truck, and we're taking this horse to Louisville for the Kentucky Derby." The horse is worth a fortune. He said when the contact came, the horse came out and hydroplaned across the road, but stayed on its feet. He says, "You ruined this poor animal." And I mean, you go into an NFL clubhouse. I mean, you're not going to get that kind of stuff from Jim McMahon or, even Joe Montana. It's just, they're good guys, but they're not going to lavish you with tawdry tales like
stories like that. No, there's a good reason that, like in Guys and Dolls, there's the Fugue for Tin Horns, seeing the guys with the horse right here. It's a very, and I think it's getting less so over time, but there's a Damon Runyon quality to the backside that is quite a thing. Now, in your remembering both King Leatherburys, you talk about both King Leatherburys. Who are the two King Leatherburys?
Yeah, so right. So early on, and let's go back to the 70s when he really started claiming, started winning, started getting a lot of horses. He would show up to the barn. There were the noted claiming wars that he had. They called them claiming wars, but there was a lot of multi-transactional days with John Tamaro, Buddy Delp, of course, Dick Tuttrow Sr., and Leatherbury, where there was almost like this subtext of goings on. They would try to outdo each other. They would try to beguile one another. They would try to dress their horses up, bandage them in a way to make them either more or less likely to claim. And I know it is it is certainly contrasts today, where so much more care and attention is given to the horse, and justifiably so. Back in the day, there was less so, and these practitioners were just working within the parameters. But the point is that Leatherbury did this. He performed the role of trainer as scripted for a number of years, and then his stable got so big, 100 horses, he had to split it up between Pimlico and Laurel. And soon thereafter, the state rescinded its prohibition on phones at the racetrack.
So what year is that?
Oh boy, that would be the late 80s. I want to say mid to late 80s. Yeah, because there were these were associated with bookmaking laws, right? And the thought was that if you wanted to put one over, you're right there at the track. It just would make it easy. And so they had this prohibition. They rescinded it. And that proved enlightening for Leatherbury, because he said, well, yeah, he says, I could spend one day at Pimlico and I could spend another day at Laurel. He said, but why would I want to do that when I can just stay at home? So he got top-notch assistants who could report the doings of the day in the barn. He got the best exercise riders he could find, because he said an exercise rider can feel a hell of a lot more than a trainer can see. And, he was both impish and practical about his assessment of this. And he's like, it's nice, horses, trainers, they get to, they hang out the outside rail and they get to telling stories, and that's fun and everything. But he said, I had an old Irish groom named James Campbell. And Campbell said to me once, it's like shaving a dead man. And Leatherbury said, and I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, Campbell said, well, it looks good, but it doesn't really do any good. It doesn't serve any purpose. So, the fact that he then became a hands-off guy, he's not even at the track, he's still winning race after race after race, and he's just really stifling the earning potential of all his rival trainers, right? And this had a certain inflammatory aspect for a lot of the horse training community. He also, he seemed in those early days, which was the first King Leatherbury, the early days, at least as far as I really got to know him back in the 80s, he was a little more guarded, he was more serious, maybe because people were taking pot shots at him regularly. Not that he ever apologized for his winning. He relished it. He loved to win, and he doesn't seem like one of these, type A alpha male, real guys, but I think he just he relished the challenge of winning races, how hard it is, and so he went through that period very, very seriously, and then toward like the early 2000s, when his owner started dying off, he wasn't replenishing to the extent he nearly had. His seemed a barn maybe beginning a slow decline, and it seemed like as he became less of a threat to win, he in turn became more jocular. He started becoming a life of the party guy, more of a storyteller. He would have these quips and anecdotes. He was a fabulous joke teller, and it seemed like the smaller his stable became over time, the more comical and engaging he became, the more hyped he became. He was no longer really a threat to other trainers, at least in terms of winning races. And so he sort of morphed into this favored uncle kind of guy. And he would just lavish people with stories. I would go to a number of racetrack functions. These would be, awards, dinners, cocktail hours. And you'd find a table, you'd see King, and there'd be half a dozen young women just sitting around. These weren't even racetrackers. I don't know. It's like the Pied Piper. They just gravitated. but he had that sort of charm, you know, an unlikely charisma about him. And again, from a journalistic standpoint, just always accessible and always full of both colorful and as far as I could tell, truthful quotes.
Yeah, let's talk for a minute about the first King Leatherbury, the one who claimed all the horse, which claiming horses was a thing that, as you mentioned, people didn't do. I mean, he said to me, it's taboo. It was taboo, man. You go claim a horse and everybody would be mad at you. But as you know, he's, kind of said, well, we'll see. 3 months, we'll see. You got the money, I got the horse. We'll see who got the better end of the deal. What is it? What was it that, a lot of trainers claim horses, not a lot of trainers win 6,500 races with those horses. What was it you think that made him so much more effective than a lot of others?
Honestly, it was numbers. So when King really ascended as a claiming trainer, he not only paid attention, he had a New York client by the name of Len Ragozin. And Ragozin, as many know, had the sheets, the racing sheets. And Leatherbury was I believe he might have been exclusive in his accessibility to these sheets. So Ragozin calls him one day, Ragozin, a New York guy, and he says to King, look, he introduced himself. He says, I want you to train my horses. He said, I'm gonna tell you which horses I want to claim, and I'm gonna tell you where I want to run them. He said, you might find that we claim a horse for 10,000 in Maryland, and I win, and I take him to New York, and I win for 25. And Leatherbury was like, okay, sure. And Ragozin said, in exchange, I'm gonna give you access to my sheets, it was a burgeoning thing then. I mean, it was kind of an underground, more or less, endeavor. And so this was a batting practice fastball for King, because it gave him insight into a horse's true worth and ability. You had the sheet numbers. So, horses, they don't run the same every time. They're like people. I mean, I had a real lousy day yesterday myself, and and horses are in and out racing wise that day. So you might have a horse that on the sheets would run a 12, which is better than a 17, than a 14, but you would get a line on a horse's true ability.
And this is before like everybody now sees buyers, brisnet figures. This is before any of that.
Well before buyer. Yes, this is maybe close to 20 years before the buyer figs became ubiquitous in the racing form. First the Racing Times, I believe, and then the form. But yeah, and so that really gave him an insight, and I think he reveled in that edge. Like he thought, wow, I got this market cornered, But he was really he was a good horseman too. Glenn Lane, who actually introduced King Leatherbury for the Hall of Fame. Glenn had said that when King was training horses for him, Glenn was a New York guy, well-heeled guy, that King was a really good caretaker during the day, and that that he thought other horsemen either lost sight of that or didn't wish to recognize it after the fact. But folks forget King claimed taking risks, I believe, for 20,000. It might have been 25, and he won a grade 1 race with him. I mean, who does that, right?
In fact, here he is. He's the horse in third here. And I'm not playing the audio, but if you could track this video down on YouTube, the announcers are basically at the end of the race are saying, the legendary King Leatherbury claims this horse for, a paltry $20,000 and, wins the grade 1 Island with it.
That was a phenomenal effort. He won the Maryland Million Classic too, I want to say. His rise was just meteoric. And he held his form for a long period of time. And that, I don't know, I felt like King didn't really get the credit he deserves for that. And I mean, there were a number of others too that he claimed and sent up the ranks and really did well with.
It is funny because one of the things that's funny is you're telling stories that King told you that then King probably years later told me, and they're more or less the same. And in talking about the rags, he said, this guy from New York calls me, Len Ragosin, and same thing. He's gonna tell me which horses to claim. And he said, so he tells me to claim this horse. I run him back 2 weeks later, and it win. And then he tells me to claim another horse. I run him back 2 weeks later, and it win. And he's like, I'm thinking, I really got something.
Exactly. And you made me recall that when he talked about the claiming game, and he often would equate the claiming game with a poker game. Mm-hmm. There's a little bluffing, there's a little finesse that goes along with it. But when he once spoke with a little incredulity about people who would get upset about claims, and he said, well, I ran Ben's cat for 20,000. Anybody could have had him for that, So I mean, it's there's so much grist to that mill, and I think he loved this high wire act that came along with it, and that how the results aren't immediately known; they play out over time, and so much of that really intrigued him.
One of the things you said that triggered a memory is that he loved to win. He loved to win races. He loved to win bets too. And I remember it's going back into the 2000s, and I want to say the horse was Malibu Moonshine, who he swept like the local stakes on the road to the Preakness, ran the Preakness, finished kind of mid pack in the Preakness. Actually ran okay, but I remember he won. I think it was a horse. He won the Tessio with him, and Woody Marriott owned the horse. Woody Marriott was old by this time. King was old, although he would go on for another 20 years, which we didn't know quite then. But King, after the race, King seemed really like emotional, like really happy. And I remember sitting there, and I didn't know him at the time, and kind of thinking, oh, this is so nice. You got the old trainer, the old owner, and the last chance to, grab the brass ring kind of thing. And of course, we didn't know about Ben's cat yet. So there was more to the story still to come that we didn't know. But the better part of this is years later, I talked to King about it, when I got to know him a little bit, and he said, I said, you seemed really excited after that race. He's like, oh yeah, I was, because I cashed a huge bet. I knew that there was a shipper coming in. I knew that horse would be the favorite, and I knew he couldn't beat my horse.
So good. He loved the action. Yeah, and he would set up shop on that second floor little clubhouse room, that little clubby room there at Laurel Park, and do his betting. It was almost like a little private suite. And I remember I had gone up there. This was after his election to the Hall of Fame, but before the induction. So I did a magazine piece, and so it seemed perfect time to do it and get his thoughts. And so I asked him, can we do an interview? And he said, yeah, meet me in the little simulcast room there. So I go up, and I mean, it seemed perfectly suitable for an interview. And as I had interviewed him scores of times, this was obviously going to be a little longer. It was a feature piece. I think he had 2 or 3 pals there he was playing with. and they had a teller there, and there was a waitress. And so I'm get out my notebook and my recorder, and he's at the ticket window, and he has a nice little packet of pari-mutuel tickets that he stuffs into his shirt pocket. And in his shirt pocket, he also has one of those 4-colored pens, the green, the blue, the yellow,
Yeah.
right?
It's got like the little button on the
top. That was a staple. And he puts them in, and he looked, and I said, King, is this, you ready? And he says, why don't we drive up to the Horseshoe? I'm like, okay. So that's not exactly what I had in mind, but whatever it takes. And actually, I was kind of happy because I kind of get him out of the element,
Mm-hmm.
And so we go into the parking lot. He's got this white Lexus that was pretty, as they would like to say, rode hard and put away wet. And, we get in, and he is freewheeling in this thing. He's like Dale Earnhardt in the Lexus. The dashboard, it's all lit up. It's like a pinball machine. Lights are flashing. He's completely oblivious.
You're afraid you're going to go on tilt.
Okay? And I'm in the passenger seat. I got my notebook out, the recorder going. I'm half looking at the road because he's darting and weaving. He's going way too fast. And at one point I said to him, which I think I might have put in the piece, I said, King, can you drive and talk at the same time? He said, hell yeah, I handicap while I'm driving. And he had this system that he wanted to try to cultivate, which was he would go to the casino, he would go to the roulette wheel. He preferred Horseshoe because they had the towers, the roulette towers, and he would look for the strings. So, he said, in any gambling endeavor, it's not win, lose, win, lose. No. It's win, 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 lose, lose, lose. He says things happen in streaks and cycles. He says, and that's the way it is with roulette. So his plan was that he would look at the roulette wheel. He would wait to see if there were 5 or 6 blacks that came. And once the streak broke and it came red, he would start laying on the reds. Okay. So we go to the Horseshoe. He parks his car. I said, well, we take the elevator. He goes, no, hell no. He said, we'll take the stairs. He said, it's the only exercise I ever get. He said, I don't work out. I don't do, anything else. So we take the stairs. I mean, I'm trying to think. This is 2015 now. So he was 82, yeah, right? Sure. 82. He's just striding along with purpose. We go into the casino. He looks for the roulette that he seeks. He's looking for the cycle. He finds it. The 6 blacks. Then it comes 12 red, and then he's gonna bet another red. 2,000 in chips. He takes out of a plastic bag that he had. I think he pulled it out of the driver's door pocket. So he's got all these chips. 2,000 in chips. He puts it on red. And it comes up black. And he goes, He goes, that's unfortunate. And he says, let's go. So I said, really, King? I said that with all this way. He says, yeah. He says, it's not going to happen. He says, what? I says, I've only got 1,000 left. He says, what am I going to do? I lost $2,000. What am I going to do? Win and get 1,000 back? Then I'm even, but I've lost money. That's just not a competent way to gamble. He said. And so we got in the car and we went back. But so he was.
Did you go back to Laurel after that?
Yes, we went back to Laurel. We finished the interview there. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, he was just an unexpected delight almost always.
You in a piece you wrote described his storytelling, I guess you'd say, as 3 parts honesty and 1 part shtick. I'm not sure that that was the precise measurement, but, yeah. But talk about what you meant by that.
Yeah, I think he was so calculated really in all of his methodologies, it seemed. And that even spilled over into the information he'd provide in an interview. So, we would talk about his days where he ruled Maryland and the nation as a horse winning trainer, and he would say things like, well, he would say, I know guys are criticizing me. If I were them, I'd probably be criticizing me too. He had a very sober, very rational view of the world. I think that's part of what made him so successful, is that he didn't delude himself. He sought reality in numbers, in horses' times, in ability, in his stable hands ability to run a competent shed row, and and he also had a humanity to him. He had said, I'm not a horse lover per se. I'm a horse racing lover. And that was true. But, he bred Ben's cat. He was president of the MHBA for a while. He had a hands-on approach with horses. He loved dogs. He had a special fondness for dogs, which he professed. And as I put in the appreciation, there was a time maybe 10 years ago where these turkey vultures started showing up on his property, and rather than get alarmed and shoo them off, he went and bought raw pork and put it out for them, and they became like regular guests. So he had a bit of an unexpected soft side to him too. So he had this honesty, he had this humanity. He had a real ironclad will to win. I mean, that's a thread throughout his professional tapestry. But then as time went on again, he would tell these jokes, and many of them you could print. And
others.
I printed a couple in the appreciation, and he told them with a flourish. He was really good at it. And what he said was, he said, I said, what's the genesis of all of this? He said, well, he says, I got so many awards along the way, and those award ceremonies, they're really boring. I mean, and people get up there and they just drone. And I thought, well, if I'm going to get up there, I got to give them a little something to remember. I got to dress up the proceedings, these draft proceedings. And so that is kind of how he started with his quip.
But I do think, I mean, you put it as 3 parts honesty, 1 part shtick. I think something I wrote about him, I said, like, the jokes were the spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down.
Beautiful.
I remember he told me a story, and he told everybody some version of this at some point over the years. That he said, a young guy, an up and coming owner, he doesn't want Leatherbury because Leatherbury's going to drop dead. That's what he's going to think. And you laugh at it, but it's true.
It's
couldn't get
funny
owners at the end.
because you had said that things he told me, he would tell you. Well, that very aspect, that very nugget that he gave to you, he gave to me too. And this was during that interview that took us to the horseshoe. And I said to him, well, I said, King, you're a Hall of Fame trainer now. Doesn't that give you some kind of currency? And he goes, hell no. He says, I'm old. He says, any new owner who comes into the game, he's going to want a young trainer, somebody he can grow with. He says, no, I'm dead on that part. And then he said something that really haunted me. He said, outside of racing, I'm not King Leatherbury anymore. And it just, it struck me that, here was a guy who was multifaceted, who probably could have excelled in whatever endeavor he had tried. But he was so defined by the racing world and so inculcated in it. It was hard for him. And here he was, again, 82 years old, right? I mean, a time when most people are long retired. You know, it was such a hard departure and a hard thought about, you know, not having racing in his life. And so it was really gratifying in that way that he, you know, he stayed a staple. You know, he kept going to the simulcast room. He was there. He was visible. He was part of the everyday racing product as was fitting.
One of the interesting things about his getting into the Hall of Fame, talking about sort of later in his career, I mean, my take was always he had deserved to be in the Hall of Fame for a long time before he got in with, you know, his innovations, as you referenced, in claiming and stable management. But it's like he needed something to get people to kind of reconsider his career and look at him a second time. And the something that it turned out to be was 2 homebreds in a row for a guy who had always claimed his horses. He runs out. Avon Thorpe pointed this out to me, you know, back in 2015. He brings up Odd Day, and Odd Day wins $900,000 and a grade 3 stake. And here is Odd Day. This is actually a terrific race to watch. He's not in the picture almost at any point in this race, but he wins. Stay tuned, you'll see it. But he brings up Odd Day. Odd Day does very well. Then Odd Day, you know, kind of gets to the end of the road career-wise. And then along comes Ben's Cat. And Ben's Cat and Odd Day are very closely related genetically. They're by half brothers out of full sisters. Not quite sure what you call that, but very closely related genetically. And Ben's Cat wins a bunch of graded stakes, $2.6 million, probably the most popular Maryland horse in generations. And that's what it took to get people to go like, this guy can really train a horse.
Boy, Kenny, I'm looking at this race. Yeah, that was phenomenal. Yes, he could. You know, there was. We all know the story. Many of us know the story about Ben's Cat, how he had fractured his pelvis. It delayed his start. And who knows, in the hands of another trainer, this horse might have been hurried to the races, you know, sent out before his time. Leather gave him all the time in the world. Now, maybe that was based in part on limited expectations. But maybe not. Maybe he just felt that he wanted to allow the horse, you know, all the time he needed to recover, to get as strong a foundation as he could. There was a story that King told me that his wife Linda had gone into, I don't know, maybe a department store, and she ran into a friend of theirs, a family friend. And the family friend said, "Wow, that Ben's Cat is really something, huh?" And Linda said, "Yeah, he's doing really well." And the friend said, "Yeah, I mean, geez, all that purse dough he's making. I mean, he's just like a machine, like printing money over there." And Linda said, "Yeah, I don't know if it's all that much." And the woman said, "Linda, the horse has made over $2 million. And Linda said, "What?" She said, "Putting in cold water to, like, he didn't know." But you know, he was so funny that way. You know, and we know about his, you know, he could be very frugal, right? He liked to go on the cheap, you know, when he could. And I don't think that was so much because he was a skinflint, as because he always wanted to make sure he had a little play money, right? He wanted to make sure he had fodder for his next wager. So.
Yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable. But you know, you mentioned King Given and Ben's Cat at the time. This is Ben's Cat's last win in the 2016 Jim McKay Turf Sprint, which there was no way he could win this race, and he won this race, which is kind of what makes it neat. I also think, I said this to somebody the other day, I think a lot of trainers could have gotten a good year or two out of Ben's Cat. They couldn't have gotten whatever it was, 6 or 7 good years out of Ben's Cat. I mean, he had this horse run at a very high level year after year for a very long time. And some of that's obviously remarkable horse. Some of it's the training job.
Yeah, no question about that. You mentioned Avon Thorpe. Avon was King's longtime assistant. Avon once called King the best friend I ever had, which tells you something about the nature of that relationship. I know you've made this point before about Ben's Cat's longevity and his ability to maintain that stakes level quality for a really long period of time. Running on turf, which obviously was not a hallmark of King's horses, probably helped his longevity some. But I remember I did a piece on him as late in Ade's career. And I think Ade ran till he was 9, at least, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean his best days were behind him. I mean he was a bit waning in terms of ability. And here again, King was very rational about it, and he said I'm not getting the numbers out of him that I'm used to getting. And so he saw a horse in decline, and he was reflecting a bit of moral indecision, I think, about where do you go from him? Like, you could drop him into a 40 claimer, which they were still running at that time, or a 30 claimer, with the confidence that probably, he might not be claimed, but how much lower would you want to go to risk that? And so again, he had a sensitivity to him about the horse as an individual.
It's an interesting point. He said to me, I think this was in 2013 or 14. I talked with him about Ben's Cat, and he said to me, I have a problem. I don't appreciate things, and I really hope that I appreciate this horse enough, because he is remarkable. And he said to me, I thought this was interesting. He said, back in the 80s, I had 70s and 80s, I guess, really. I had Port Conway Lane, who, a very popular horse of that era, ran, I think, 240 starts, 52 wins, just a iron horse. And he said, and I don't think I appreciated him the way I should have, and I hope I do with this horse.
Yeah, that's interesting. He had Port Conway Lane a number of times. Yes. A lot of us old timers just remember him as a near white horse, come from behind her, thrilling closer. He had some kind of benign knot on his forehead, and he had tendon issues, and he just said the hell with all of it, and, performed one of those old iron horses. But I think a lot of us have that tendency where we don't appreciate it in the moment. We come to relish it after the fact. I mean, I think about when I started covering racing full time every day in '87, and I might have mentioned earlier, but just the gallery of elite horsemen that inhabited the backstretches of Maryland, right? So you had King, and you had Dutrow, and you had Buddy Delp, you had Bernie Bond, Sonny Hine, Tuffy Hacker, and I think at the time, and of course I was younger too, I thought, well, this sort of ironclad horsemen who are gifted in the way of storytelling, this just comes with the territory, and it's going to endure indefinitely. And it didn't endure indefinitely. It doesn't come with the territory. I mean, it was a different time. The races and the racing game have become, for lack of a better term, more corporatized, more antiseptic. You see smaller time owners and trainers kind of being scoured out, priced out of the market. This sort of top heavy aspect to the industry is not healthy. And so I just think there are things that we tend as humans to take for granted that we come to better appreciate in time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Well, Vinnie, thank you for joining me here. Any last thoughts here as we on the king as we conclude our conversation?
He had a way of nourishing us. He gave us a lot. He never shied from it. He had an unlikely magnetism about him, and I'm just grateful. All I can say is, as a turf rider, he really embodies and justifies our course of action, because he filled the notebook and delighted us and enchanted us in ways that just substantiate the undertaking.
I think that's a great way to put it. Vinnie, thank you so much for joining me here on Maryland Racing Today.
Frank, thank you for having me.
Happy to bring in Mackenzie Pfeiffer, racing analyst for the Maryland Jockey Club, John Piassek, handicapper for the RacingBiz.com. What's up, guys? How's everybody doing?
Well, it's finally slightly less snowy around here. I can finally see the grass on my front lawn, so that's definitely a step in the right direction.
I'm with you on that.
My dog has started wandering to the barn, and it is, venturing out past just the driveway area. So that's great. It's a little too much of an inconvenience for him up until this weekend.
Well, we added 2 dogs this week. We adopted 2 dogs on Monday, and we're having quite an interesting learning curve for our new additions. They're nervous about everything. So, but they do like going out in the backyard. So
that makes 3 of us.
You're nervous about everything, or you like going in the backyard?
Why not both?
Oh, why not? Why not, indeed?
This is great for the news segment, Frank. We definitely will stay up to date on the new adventures.
Exactly. Who needs horse racing? We've got dogs to talk about. But let's actually talk about horse racing. So last weekend at Laurel, they ran the General George, the Fritchie, some other stakes, bunch of things going on. Let's start. I want to start with the General George. And John, let me start with you here. Point Dume. How good is he right now? That was really a good effort in the General George, I thought.
And that's now back-to-back huge efforts, because he ran a gigantic race in the Fire Plug handicap last time out. In the Fire Plug, it looked like he was going to be swallowed up at 3 different points in the race, but he fought on and ran big. Then here in the General George, going into the race, it feels like it was kind of hyped up as a match race between Quince Brew, who went up at 3-5, and Slam Notion, who was 3-1. Point Dume kind of fell through the cracks, but Point Dume never really gave them a chance. He made the front pretty easy. Slam Notion's about to make his move. Quince Brew is following him, and they really can't make a dent against Point Dume. He was clear throughout the stretch run, and he went a blazing fast second quarter as well. Never got tired, won pretty easy. That's now, I believe, 3 stakes wins since October 1st for this 5-year-old, including 2 big wins on this track. We had a big second 3 starts ago at Parks. So it looks like he's really rounding into career best form, and he's a horse who has quietly built up a big resume and could build it up even further in the coming months.
Mac, we had David Bushy on the show last week, and we talked with him, and he and his father Brian own this horse. So it's one of the really cool stories in Mid-Atlantic racing. His father battling pancreatic cancer, but taking strength and inspiration from this horse, and and the way it's bringing the family together. I mean, it's a fun story. I mean, you obviously are hoping for the best for the Bushies and hoping that Brian is able to keep fighting back and fighting on.
Right, and just keep enjoying the ride with this horse. As you mentioned, he's kind of finding career best form right now, and so that certainly is something to look forward to. But I have to admit, when they went the opening in 23 and change, going into the far turn, I said, I think this is over. I mean, I used a few horses in the pick 5 there because I felt like there were a few different ways it could go, and felt justified watching that happen because he was just galloping along. I mean, it was no problem for him, and they just weren't going to catch him. There's plenty of speed in the race, but he just got to relax out there and do it all his own way.
I would think you've got to think about graded stakes for this horse at this point, that the kind of form he's in right now. And that field wasn't bad. I mean, Quint Spruce, multiple graded place. Like he missed winning 2 graded stakes by an eyelash. Slam Notions, up and coming, has won a couple of stakes. Blue Kingdom in really good form. And he pretty much just, spit on him. He's like,
Right.
I'm too good for you guys. And so should be fun to see what happens next. Now, Mac, you and I talked last week heading into the Fritchie, and we thought that Passage East might fall into a really good trip, breaking from the outside with some speed. But then there were a couple scratches. 2 speed horses came out. Then I wasn't quite sure. Well, she fell into a perfect trip again.
She fell into a perfect trip again. Nothing was handed over to her, though. And I mean, I was feeling a little biased because I just fell in love with her when I got to meet her in the morning. But I mean, what an incredible filly to go ahead and step up the way that she did. She just gets a great trip tracking along. I thought Sheldon did an incredible job just keeping her comfortable and letting her work things out. And, everything just kind of went the right way for it. That when she finally gets up there and has to go ahead, make a move and really put the pressure on, Take Them Honey Honey is no slouch. And that is what really impressed me with the way that she was able to just kind of make this stalk and pounce move. And these two just end up opening up. Hate to spoil the ending for you, but it was a horse race to the wire.
Yeah, spoiler alert. This is a fantastic finish. These horses hook up at the quarter and go nose to nose all the way to the wire. And they run away, John, from Dry Powder, who was grade 1 place last year.
Yeah, I mean, she ran a bunch of huge races as a 3-year-old, and as we're watching these two duel down the stretch, I was very impressed by Take the Money Honey's race because at the top of the stretch, it looked like Passage East was going to win by however much she wanted to. But Take the Money Honey would not go down without a fight, lost yet another heartbreaking photo finish, one of many she has now lost in her career. And you have to give a lot of props to Passage East, and in particular, trainer Hugh McMahon. I know we talk a lot about great training jobs. This has been a bona fide great training job because this filly did not like to win one bit at the start of her career. I think she had like 5 runner-up finishes in her first 6 starts. Textbook definition of a chronic maiden. A light bulb has gone off, and she's won, I think, 7 of her last 8 while effortlessly climbing a class ladder. So hats off to both of the top 2 finishers. They ran tremendous.
Now, I have to jump in there because you look at who she was up against in those first 5 efforts, and what was it? Luminous Secret, Complexity Jane, Late Night Call, Reply, and then finally Passage East pops up.
That's true.
No slouches that she was up against in those maiden efforts.
No, that's true. But Hugh has done a nice job, and he described winning that race with a $30,000 claim as quote unquote nothing short of miraculous. So he was pretty excited afterwards. And interestingly enough, kind of a random point, both the General George and the Fritchie won by horses that had been claimed. The Point Dume, a $40,000 claim, Passage East, a $30,000 claim. So nice to see horses kind of moving up the ladder after landing in different barns and maybe kind of finding their stride. Now, one other person that I want to mention who really has found his stride is the apprentice rider Yedson Hazelwood. He won 10 races last weekend. He had 3 riding triples, and then another day where he only won once because, just a bad day for him. But Mac, I mean, I think people in Maryland would say he probably should have won the Eclipse Award as champion apprentice. He didn't win his first race till April. He missed a couple of months with injury. He's really good right now. I think he's really good in general. I think he's got a big, bright future in front of him. I do hope that he sticks around Maryland a little longer and kind of sharpens his game a little bit before he goes hunting bigger game.
I agree. I think we've seen a tremendous amount of talent. There are certain things that would prompt you to say go to New York or try those bigger stages. But for the experience and what Maryland has produced as far as jockeys go, I don't think it will be any hindrance to him to stick around here, and would certainly be wise. And it was interesting, the post-time stakes, we ended up getting Pietro Moran in, and would have been kind of fun if Hazelwood ended up with a ride in there. But that horse ended up just being very, very impressive on the day. But Hazelwood did get the job done with Atlantis Queen. And that trip, I wasn't necessarily sure. I thought that was the winning trip for the race. I just wasn't sure she could do it. So to see him put that trip together, I thought was a very great read. And that showed just how much he's developed throughout this year.
Yeah, no, he's riding really well, and he's Gary Capuano always says I love the bug, and he'll ride the bug in stakes even though he doesn't get the weight break, and nobody's riding better than Hazelwood around Laurel right now. Although he's got a 10-win lead right now in the jockey standings, John. The guy who's second is also riding really well right now. That's Angel Cruz.
I mean, both of them have been riding absolutely lights out. And to your point about how great a meet Hazelwood's having, he started off by his standards relatively slow. It's really only been in the past week or so that he's opened up that big lead. So even for first few weeks of the meet, I was like, maybe he's not quite as good this year. But so far, no sophomore slump. He's been having a tremendous season. And foreshadowing alert, he has some very live mounts coming up on Saturday, including a horse who may put him in at least a Tessio starting gate, if not possibly bigger races down the road.
I feel like we're using the software here. I got to see if I can find this. I got to find like a drum roll for you since you just gave us that. Let's see here. Do we have one of those? Drum roll.
Oh, wow.
Good. Okay. Can't wait to hear what you guys have for handicapping. I'm going to drop off for a minute here, let the handicapping adults in the room talk about handicapping, and I'll come back on in a couple minutes. What you got, guys?
Well, Frank's going to make dinner, and we'll do all of the heavy lifting here for the second portion. But really fun card coming up this weekend, Saturday in particular. Obviously some up-and-coming races for these 3-year-olds are included in that late pick 5. And that all starts in race 5, going the 5.5. Pretty interesting race as well. John, how much did you factor into the conditions of this race when you were handicapping it?
I mean, this is basically a stakes quality field, as we'll get to in a moment. I mean, we got Prince of Jericho and it's Hammer Time, who I think are kind of head and shoulders above everyone else. But even among the rest, you got No Sense, who has won a bunch of Jersey bred stakes and earned over $500,000. Dean Delivers, multiple stakes wins on his card. Karen's Notion won the Maryland Million Sprint a few years back. So it's not quite the General George, but it's a very solid B team, if nothing else. And you might see a few of these horses in the Frank Whiteley Stakes in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Now, how do you play the pick 5 starting off in this first leg? I'm with you there on Prince of Jericho. It's Hammer Time. The race does sort of feel like it runs through the two of them.
I think in a situation like this, in which it's pretty much a 2-horse race, if you play in the pick 5, you pretty much have to use only one of them. And I did not pick the horse that was spotlighting here. It's Hammer Time on top. But from a fan perspective, I have been looking forward to this race for a very long time. I was extremely impressed with him as a 2-year-old. He won a pair of stakes at Delaware Park, running huge speed figures both times. This is his one and only start as a 3-year-old, coming on April 13th, and an open allowance going 6 furlongs, makes the front here. As you can see, he's really not even being asked to go by J.G. Torrealba. Reggie runs rogue, comes up on his outside, and it's hammer time. Gets some urging here, but he gets away, wins, runs a huge figure. And that horse in the blinkers coming up on the outside, that's Barbadian Runner, who we all know had a tremendous year last year, culminating with his Maryland Million Classic victory. And it's hammer time, beat him by over 5 lengths. Unfortunately, it's hammer time. Missed the rest of his 3-year-old season with injuries. Came back to the work tab in late October. He's been working pretty well both here and at Laurel Park since. He's just run into a very classy horse in Prince of Jericho, so I'm not quite sure if he can beat him first off the layoff, and for that reason, I am more likely to single Prince of Jericho. But as a fan, I am cheering for It's Hammer Time, and I think he could have a very big 2026.
I'm with you. I'm sort of looking at a $32 ticket where I go ahead and use both of them because I can't quite bring myself, but I do love an early single. And Prince of Jericho, I mean, you talk about that race last time out with Chipotle where he looked like he was about to win it and Chipotle just found something else. I mean, that was every bit of a horse race. So I do think, especially with the pace between races and everything else, Prince of Jericho should finally go ahead and get his day. He's just gotten really unlucky these last two. Race number 6, though, is another kind of interesting one, going 6 furlongs. So how do you end up playing here?
You know, the more I handicap this race, the more I was inclined to single number 4, Tuned to the Moon. I really liked her last race, which came on February 6th. Against a few of these rivals. It was her first start since August 8th, and she ran a gigantic race on the lead, set a very fast pace where she opened up by 3 lengths on the turn. It looked like she was going to pull off the wire job first off the layoff, got tired late, ended up coming in 3rd. Still, for her first start in so long, it was a tremendous effort. 2 starts back, she lost to Sassafrasness, who came back to win on Sunday and completed another hat trick for Mr. Hazelwood. So I figure Tuned to the Moon should take a big step forward second time off the layoff. And if she does, she'll be very tough to catch.
I agree. And this is one who, I mean, she's had a remarkable amount of speed all throughout. And I'm excited to get her back here for the 4-year-old year. Sassafrasness, you mentioned, really impressive what she's been able to do, has been stepping up big time in company. So no slouch there. And for me, I actually was excited. Fabio was my top pick when Tuned to the Moon was coming off the bench. I took a little bit of a shot feeling like the race set up for her. And, you know, maybe I was wrong the rest of the day, but that's where I felt like I struck gold.
And 11
I
won that day too. Big price.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
all you need to be right. I mean, a horse like that, all you got to do is be right one time and you're golden.
Exactly. But, you know, Tuned to the Moon, I had the same opinion where really liked her, just wanted to give her a race. And so this does really come back to set up well for her. I'm intrigued by Chrissy N just to her outside, though. I thought she ran fantastic, and she was the one who made me so nervous in that last outing. She finished second, just ahead of Tuned to the Moon. And I thought she had a really sort of shuffled trip all in all. And as the race was coming together, I was thinking, gosh, I need to go ahead and throw this one into the exactas and the tries because I kind of wrote her off early on and I thought she ran great and just might be kind of coming into herself there.
Yeah, she's run pretty well in her 3 starts since coming off a brief layoff in early October. Definitely taking advantage of some class drops in her last 2 tries. I do think if you don't want a single Tune to the Moon, there are a lot of ways that you can go. And I certainly would not begrudge anybody who wants to throw Chrissy N on their ticket.
And obviously you have the speed outside In Awe of Juju and Tis Purple, 2 different nest runners. I lean a little bit to In Awe of Juju, maybe shortening up just the 6 furlongs instead of the 6.5, coming down from New York. Maybe straight to Laurel. Do you have any preference for those types?
I do want to note that In Awe of Juju is making her first start for the Jamie Ness barn. He's won with the horse making their first start in his barn twice each of the past 2 racing days as of this recording. He had one on Saturday and one on Sunday, so that is a good angle to keep in mind. Number 7, Tiz Purple, as you noted, the other nest runner, Michael Sanchez, is on this one. I was really kind of turned off by her last start at Parks. She got involved in a speed duel and finished beaten by 9 lengths. There is a lot of speed in this contest. I think there's a shot. She ends up getting fried on the lead, and I don't know how she'll do forced to come from off the pace.
I kind of have to agree with you, and that's where, kind of works out for those 2 horses we mentioned earlier. Race 7, though, we jump into stakes company with the wide country. So 3-year-old girls going the 7 furlongs. I went back and forth a little bit, but pretty competitive field. Where do you land?
I am very high on number 3, Law School, for the aforementioned Mr. Ness and Mr. Hazelwood. This filly's won her last 2 starts by a combined 21 lengths, including a big win in the Future Stars Filly Stakes at Parks, which we're watching here. Gets a nice setup off the pace, so that's one knock on her. But still, you can't control what kind of setup you get. Sometimes you just have to take advantage of it, and she took full advantage here, cruising the stretch, won by 7, ran a career best figure on the Brisnet scale of 93, matching up nicely with the 87 that she earned in a 14-length win 2 starts prior. There's really nobody else in here who has run 2 figures even close to that. And there is a lot of speed in here and a lot of unproven speed. Mo Maxey went gate to wire in her debut win. Velocity Girl went gate to wire to break her maiden. Don't quite know how she'll do first time against winners. So the pace could end up setting up for Law School. And if she gets a similar trip as she did last time, she's going to win by many, many, many lengths.
Now, I go back and forth. For me, it's kind of like flipping a coin on this race, where I see where Law School could go ahead and get away and agree with you there. But I don't totally trust that 80 buyer last out. It was such a big jump, and she had such a comfortable trip, as you talked about, where she was just able to kind of switch off for the first portion and then make her charge, get the jump on everyone else. And, we haven't really seen much. One horse ran back with a 34 buyer. It was the 5th place finisher, I believe. So you take it with a grain of salt. But Divine Intentions, who finished 2nd, was coming in off of a 61 buyer. So I just don't know if I totally trust. How much would you trust the 80 buyer? I guess you're leaning in.
I would, because at least on my speed figure scale, she has run 2 races in a row that were that fast. That makes me feel a little more comfortable. And I do think if there's any trainer around here who you can trust, they'll be able to have their horse ready to run another big race off a career top. It's Jamie Ness.
This is true. Now, Peach Tie is one who I happened to be watching Keeneland that day. And I thought, wow, what a trip when she won there. And I said, I hope we get to see this one in Maryland. And so sure enough, when she came to Maryland, I was not going to miss out. She lands just to the outside. She's one who she has the early speed if she wants to go ahead and use it. We saw that in that last outing, but she doesn't necessarily need to. She lands outside. How do you think those 2 stack up against each other?
She's a hard horse to gauge, because on one hand, if you look at her early, middle, and late pace figures, she tends to make big moves and kind of slow down pretty dramatically late. So at first glance, she's a bit underwhelming, but you have to consider the circumstances of a lot of those wins. She won 2 starts back against only 3 other rivals. Last time out in the Gin Talking Stakes, she only beat 2 other horses. So obviously Sheldon Russell is not going to ask for her best when she's already way out in front in a small field. He's going to kind of gear her down, and that's kind of what happened there. Flip side of that, though, is she hasn't been quite as battle-tested as one might hope. She gets another small field in here, and she did beat Just Filtered and Superstitious in the Gin Talking, both stakes winners in their own right. I just don't know how she'll fare if she makes a move after a horse like Law School or even Mo Maxi, and they fight back.
Exactly. We'll be curious how that pace scenario really sets up if we let someone get loose in there or we keep things honest. Race number 8, though, the Miracle Wood, we go just a little bit further for the boys, going a mile here. And there's a horse I think you've been pretty excited to talk about.
Yes, it is the younger half brother to It's Hammer Time. Let's Go Lando, who has won 2 out of his last 3 starts by open lengths. In fact, with the news on Wednesday afternoon that Balboa is going to scratch, Let's Go Lando is the only horse in here who has beaten winners. He did so last time out in this first level allowance race on opening weekend. Sat a very nice trip just off the pace on the inside. He has nowhere to go. Now he finally finds a seam in the true path at the top of the stretch in what I should note is his first start, or second start rather, with Yedzi at Hazelwood up. Takes control at the top of the lane and runs a very big Grisnet figure of 97, being a pretty nice field, which includes Maryland juvenile winner Code of Silence. Now he broke his maiden going a mile and a 16th 3 starts back on Breeders' Cup Saturday. His recent workouts have been very sharp. He won a bullet 5 furlongs in 1 minute and 2 last Saturday. Of course, anyone trained by Gary Capuano and ridden by Yedzi Hazelwood merits a tremendous amount of respect. And this one has tons of pedigree. His dam, Steady in Love, a very accomplished producer in her own right. His grand dam, Slow and Steady, one of the all-time great broodmares in Maryland history, just gaggles of stakes winners. Third dam, Cherokee Wonder, also an accomplished broodmare. She was the dam of Cherokee's Boy, one of the best Maryland breds of the mid-2000s. So this is a family who tends to like more distance and gets better with age. So I have to figure as he progresses through his 3-year-old season, Let's Go Lando is only going to get better. So I think he may be sitting on a career best race heading in the Miracle Wood.
Now, I have to agree with you. And I really like that we saw a little bit more turn of foot last time out from him in that replay. Lasix went on for the first time in that race as well. He made a big jump up from 53 to back to the 79 buyer in that last outing, but gets back hopefully to a fast track this weekend. Now, one horse who I thought learned a lot more than you would have expected for a debut runner, Taj Mahal, Brittany Russell. We assume Sheldon is going to end up on this one, but no rider named at the moment. Ran a 72 buyer on debut against a solid group of horses, but there was a lot going on. I felt like it was a great experience. The horse looked fantastic coming home too.
I was going to say, that was a pretty salty field on paper, and Taj Mahal basically beat him with his hands tied behind his back. He won going away, ran a huge figure on the Brisnet scale as well of 85. I would like to have seen a workout since that last race. He has not worked since that big win on February 6th, and it can be a tall task to ask a horse to win a stakes race at second asking. But as noted, only one horse in here has beaten winners in their own right. Clearly, the SF Starlight crew has been behind him for a long time. That's why they shelled out $525,000 for him. So it would be no shock at all if he ran another big race.
And he's a fantastic looking horse, so it all makes sense when you see him on Saturday. I don't mind that he hasn't had to work. It's a quicker turnaround from February 6th to this upcoming weekend. So I think, just with galloping, he has enough maintenance on coming into that first race that I'm hoping he has enough fitness. But the turn of foot was flashy enough that, maybe a little bit more ground, we could see another improvement. Close the Gate, also interesting. All right, I spread around in this race, though. Do you kind of go off Let's Go Lando, or do you spread in here?
If I had to punch a ticket right now, I'd probably use Close the Gate, Taj Mahal, and Let's Go Lando. I'd probably single Law School only because it's going to be a short field, especially short field in the wide country. So I don't want to get too much coverage and then end up having to eat chalk and then be like, why'd I spread? So if I've singled twice earlier in the sequence, I have enough coverage that I can go a little bit deeper here. So I'd probably go 4, 5, 7.
Very good. I agree with you. I might throw in the 2, just depending on how the day's going. But we'll wrap things up. Race number 9, and this is another 3-year-old event, but these are for the maidens going a mile on the dirt. And for the girls, this race, I felt like there were 2 horses who I really felt could win here, but I could make a case for just about anyone.
Well, I picked number 1, Hoof and Boots on top. I mean, Juniper's Jubilee, after many tries, finally broke through last time out and won easy. But Hoof and Boots ran a nice race of her own, made a nice 3-wide move on the turn, outfinished the rest of the field by over 5 lengths, ran a career best Brisnet figure of 78. The only question is the distance. She has not been beyond 6 furlongs on dirt, but nobody else in here is that proven going this far either. So I think as long as she can tolerate a mile, she'll be okay.
I agree with you. And I think the trip, works out. Hopefully she can get comfortable. Jonathan Maldonado has been on an absolute roll the last week or so, though. So don't overlook anything that he's sending out at this moment. Second off, a short freshening also improves. I also like the number 5 in here. Nothing Less Will Do. I'm hoping this one might be a little bit overlooked in the group, but Velocity Girl, we're going to end up seeing earlier on in Stakes Company, and that's who this one ran second to, first time Lasix, last time out.
Well, it's going to be a little bit tricky for pick 5 purposes, unfortunately, but I suppose if you're playing a late double or something and Velocity Girl runs really well in the wide country, it would definitely boost Nothing Less Will Do stock in this one.
I completely agree. Now, and that's, you can't necessarily see the future when we love that.
If I could, I'd be doing this podcast from a beach in Malibu.
It's warming up around here. We'll hope the weather holds out for us this upcoming Saturday. Maybe a little bit of rain coming through, but I'm optimistic here. We've had enough of the snow and the cold. And
I mean, I would say after this winter, we are due for like every Saturday being 75 and sunny until like November. Like
I'll take it.
Do
you think Frank's finished his dinner? Should we see if we can get him back in here?
I mean, it's been a while, so even if he has to like eat and talk, he should be okay. Frank?
I should have got well.
You know what? I haven't eaten dinner yet. Mac's off having breakfast for dinner, and what did you have, by the way? What was your breakfast for dinner?
I made a pepper omelet and some pancakes and then bacon.
Wow, look at you.
I like to cook. That's
okay. I'll be by later.
Feel free. Well, I moved. I don't have a dinner table set up yet, but the dining room's actually sort of the storage unit while everything shuffles. But
okay.
Hopefully, by the time the spring comes around, everything will be in place and you guys can stop by for dinner.
Can't wait. You're coming, right, John? Pepper omelets.
I mean, I'll be down at least Tessio weekend and for Renaissance Awards weekend. So what better place
Perfect.
To have breakfast for dinner than Casa de Pfeiffer?
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow, I like it.
We'll watch some replays and maybe do the podcast in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, now you're talking. I like it. We just changed the whole format to handicapping over dinner.
Exactly.
Did you guys solve all the problems, all the weekend problems? Got all the winners?
Yes, we did. Yes.
Okay, good.
I am very confident in my opinion, and I was saying that the 5th race on Saturday is kind of an example of where my handicapping brain and my fan brain kind of go separate, because I'm going to probably end up singling Prince of Jericho in the pick 5, but as a fan, I hope It's Hammer Time runs a huge race.
It's the worst feeling to be in that position too. And there are some days where, Frank, I think I've seen you go back to the Laurel Futurity day where I was trying to beat the Grand Motion horse, and all day I just said, I know this horse is going to win. And yet I've played a ticket trying to beat him, thinking I'm so strategic. But do you just wake up I do, where you just feel like, I know I'm going to be wrong. I just can't back down at this point.
Yeah, I know that you get in these streaks, right? Where you're like, you feel like the guy who's lost every round of the title fight. And it's like, I'm just getting beaten up left and right. Nothing's going right. But then sometimes you see the ball pretty well.
That's true.
You just have to really take those moments in.
Yeah, you do. You got to enjoy it. You got to enjoy it when you win. That's the thing. Like, I've struggled with as a handicapper over the years is like, I'll win and I'll be like, yeah, I saw that. I was right. I'm smart. And then I'll lose. I'll be so mad, It's like,
well, the hard part is like, every time I pick a winner, I look back and it's like, of course, it's so obvious. How could you not have singled this horse? How could you not have bet more money?
Right, why didn't you bet more?
And then if a horse loses, it's like, of course. Didn't you see this race 3 starts back? She had no excuse that day. What were you thinking? How can you pick this horse? Why didn't you spread more? Come on. So you can't win.
No, there is no winning. Although there's winning if you like and subscribe.
That's true. You can't lose listening to this podcast.
Maryland Racing Today, the Mid-Atlantic Racing Today podcast. Mac, John, thank you for joining us here this week. Maybe let's do this again next week. What do you say?
I would love to.
Great.
Beautiful. So, yes, we will be back next week with Maryland Racing Today, powered by the Racing Biz, racingbiz.com, and presented by our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club. Look for our podcast next week to land on February 26th. And we'll keep it rolling here as we start to get hot and heavy. You're going to have to start talking a little bit about Triple Crown preps probably coming up because we're starting to get a little bit hot and heavy there. I mean, even locally, we got the Miracle Wood and the Battaglia, I guess, is this week, which is not on my list of top races that I care about, but we're starting to get to some more serious ones. So maybe we'll start talking about that a little bit as well. Well, John, Mackenzie, thank you. Good luck this weekend. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll catch you here next week.